hosting yet another intriguing and conventional theme this quarter, the third quarter of the year 2025 on Armor Gate Radio Communications. I remain Titilola Ogunshona. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who took their time to join us on every episode last quarter, where we discussed the role of financial inclusion in achieving economic growth and development in a nation. It was quite an interesting and engaging session. However, in this quarter, we will be taking a closer look at another important stimulant of economic growth, which is fiscal interventions. Thus, the theme for this new program series is titled Fiscal Interventions and Economic Growth. When policymakers seek to influence the level of activities in an economy, there are two main tools at their disposal that they could actually deploy. Okay, and that's the first tool is what we call the monetary policy, or the second, where we talk about the fiscal policy. The focus is not on monetary policy for this quarter. Okay, we did a lot around financial monetary issues in previous quarter. And when we talk about monetary policy, we are talking about those tools, those instruments that the central bank would deploy to control the level of money supply. Because if we do not control that, it's going to lead to what we call inflationary pressure in an economy, and that would affect a lot of macroeconomic variables. If you're not careful, it's going to reduce the level of domestic investment, because when interest rate is high, the government will actually have to hike up the MPR rate, and when the monetary policy rate is high, the interest rate in the economy will be high, and when that will be a disincentive for people to get money from the banks, and that would lead to a fall in investment level. And when there's a fall in investment level, definitely we are going to be talking about a fall in potential employment opportunities, and when that is low, of course you're talking about a fall in even your disposable income, a fall in aggregate demand, and it adds this multiplier effect in an economy. So like I said, the focus is not on monetary policy, it's not even on monetary policy tools, but focus that other aspect, okay, that government seeks to use direct control in order to influence the level of economic growth and development in an economy, and that is the fiscal policy. And that's why we looked at the fiscal interventions of government. And we need to lay a bit of context, when talking about fiscal interventions. What do we mean? We are referring to the fiscal tools deployed by government in a bid to achieve some specific macroeconomic objectives. There are various macroeconomic objectives that the government will seek to achieve, any government, every nation will seek to achieve, which includes full employment of resources. You want to ensure what we call the favorable balance of payment. Sometimes we talk about balance of payment equilibrium. Okay, that is when the value of export equates the value of your import. Or we talk about stable prices, because definitely any government wants to ensure that prices do not rise astronomically. Want to ensure that prices are stable, because that's no investor wants to go into a climate where we don't have high level of price uncertainty. Is not going to be good for planning, for budgeting purpose, for even investment purpose. Is not going to be good for that. And of course, you want to talk about achieving economic growth and development. When we spoke about economic growth and development last year, we said for some nations you can actually achieve economic growth without development, but you cannot achieve economic development without achieving economic growth. So for government, want to ensure that you have economic growth in all the sectors. So when this is maintained, it's going to lead to an achievement of economic development. And when we talk about fiscal tools, it includes taxation and government spending. And we should note that these two main instruments or tools play a very crucial role in enhancing economic growth in any nation or economy. I mentioned that the main tools that could be deployed in terms of fiscal tools. Of course, we also have the issue of the public debt. We also have the issue of government budget, which is also a fiscal intervention. But it should be noted that effective implementation of fiscal policy by government has the potential to stimulate economic activities, which would increase the level of investment in the country, and this is essential to create or generate more jobs and increase income levels, and thus there be an increase in standard of living of the people, and that speaks to development index in a country, the level of development in a country. That's why we talk economies, we talk about the real GDP, we talk about per capita income, which speaks to the standard of living of the people. Governments of various nations deploy tax adjustment and expedition shifts as principal fiscal instruments or tools, and we need to note that these measures could either be expansionary or contractionary fiscal policy. So you could have expansionary fiscal policy, or you could have contractionary fiscal policy, as the name implies, and these are actually deployed in various economic scenarios. So it depends on economic happenings at that point in time that will determine whether the government would carry out expansionary fiscal policy or contractionary fiscal policy. Okay, so let's look at the scenario when there is economic downtrend. Okay, of course, when there is economic downtrend or when there's a recession in the economy, definitely you know that the aggregate demand will be very low. People are not likely to have money, so definitely the demand for goods and services is going to reduce in the economy. And so what will government do at that point in time? That's why we talk about fiscal interventions, the use of fiscal policy, to stimulate aggregate demand. So what government is likely to do with tax rate is to review tax rate. There'll be a review of the tax reform. There'll be a review of the tax policy. So there'll be a reduction in tax rate, for instance, and of course a reduction in tax rate. Another fiscal tool that government would likely deploy is to increase government expenditure, government spending in the economy, because this would increase aggregate demand in the economy. And when aggregate demand is high, definitely people can then purchase more goods. Once they can purchase more goods and services, going to need firms who they can sell more, and when they sell more, there'll be increased profit. Not just increased profit, there'll be expansion. And when they expand, they mean they're going to employ more people. Employing more people means that you're going to reduce the level of unemployment in the country. There is going to be a rise in employment levels, and that also leads to an additional income level. Additional income level will further. So you look at the multiplier effect, further increase aggregate demand in the economy. Now, on the other hand, what happens when there is a period of high inflationary trend in the economy, when there is a period of inflation? And one of our quarter series, we spoke about inflation dynamics and economic growth, and we said inflation is always a monetary phenomenon. So when you talk about inflation, is associated with high price levels, a persistent rise in the general price level of goods and services. When this happens, we know that it needs to be cut. You want to cut the spending power, spending capacity of the people. So how does fiscal policy come in? It means that government is going to deploy what I call contractionary. So it means there is so much money in the economy that it is perceived to be ceteris paribus, all things being equal. They want to cut down the amount of money supply. Want to cut down the purchasing power of the people in order to curb inflationary trend. So what will government do? There'll be an upward review of tax rate, unlike the previous scenario when we had economic downturn or recession. But in this case, there'll be an upward review of tax rate, and of course there will also be an implementation of austerity measures. Okay, and all of these, the cutting, the increase, upward review of tax rate, the cutting down of government expenditure in the economy, austerity measures being implemented is just to curb spending in the economy. So you see, the beauty of fiscal intervention is that the dynamics of these fiscal policies, will directly influence the level of inflation rate, employment level, balance of payment position, in fact, and overall economic growth in an economy. So today we've already explored the main types of the fiscal intervention, talking about fiscal policy. Okay, we were looking further at the main theories. What are the theories, economic theories underlying the issue of fiscal policy? Is there an agreement among all scholars, economic scholars, that government should intervene in the economy? We'll be looking at this, and also the potential impact of fiscal policy in an economy. Okay, will it lead to economic growth and the benefit to applying fiscal policy in an economy? So now today we'll be looking at about 3 theories of fiscal policy. The first one we are going to consider is what I call the Keynesian theory of fiscal policy. We talk about the Keynesian economists. So according to the Keynesian economists, majorly the proponent of this theory is John Maynard Keynes. It perceives that government intervention through fiscal policy can stabilize the economy, particularly during recession, as I explained earlier. So the Keynesian economists believe that yes, government should intervene when there's recession, economic down trend in an economy, that the government should intervene to stimulate growth alongside stabilizing the economy. Now, and this is their argument. They believe that an increase in government spending in an economy that it's interjection of funds, injecting funds into an economy and simultaneously reducing tasks can increase aggregate demand. According to Keynesian economics, when aggregate demand increases, it's going to need an increase in output, employment, and also believe that targeted government expenditure would have immense benefit to an economy. So for instance, if government increases spending on infrastructure projects, so it means that, for example, you are constructing more roads, you are infrastructure project, education infrastructure, health infrastructure. The belief is that it's going to generate more jobs, and more jobs will mean more income, and more income will mean an increase in aggregate demand. So the Keynesian economists are of the opinion that fiscal policy intervention is very important for stabilizing the economy, especially during recession. Okay, are there other economists that share the same opinion with that of the Keynesian economists? Okay, we have another, that's the classical economists, or we call them the classicalists. So the classicalists, this school of thought argue that there should be limited government intervention in the economy, because they believe that in every economy there will be automatic stabilizers in the economy, that the economy will self-correct itself over time, even when there is disequilibrium in the economy, that has a self-correcting mechanism, the automatic stabilizers in the economy that will take it back to equilibrium level. So according to them, okay, even if there are temporary distortions in the economy, over time to self-correct itself. So thus, according to this school of thought, they argue that government intervention can actually prove to be counterproductive or even harmful to an economy. Okay, those are the schools of thought, varying thoughts, divergent views on fiscal policy. Again, we just consider the third school of thought as a monetarist school of thought, and they believe in the role of money supply in influencing the economy. So according to them, want to achieve economic growth, the monetarists want to achieve economic growth in the economy, full employment, stable prices. What you need to do is to control money supply. So changes in money supply, which is largely controlled by the central bank of a country. Now, according to them, changes in money supply, through monetary policy has a larger effect on the economy than fiscal policy or interventions. Yes, according to them, they believe that inflation is a monetary phenomenon. If you control money supply, and money supply is actually largely controlled by the central bank, although there are other factors, that would influence the level of money supply in the economy outside of the central bank. But largely, they believe that that the central bank is primarily largely responsible for controlling the level of money supply. And yes, the monetarists recognize the role of fiscal policy in influencing aggregate demand. Yes, you understand that fiscal policy plays a major role, unlike the classicalists. Okay, so you realize that these are very extreme views. Okay, but they still argue that fiscal policy isn't an effective and monetary policy in controlling inflation and achieving economic growth in an economy. But at least they recognize that fiscal policy plays a role. Okay, so you look at that too, like I said earlier when I introduced this theme of our new quarter series, that for government of various nations, and two main tools they might decide to deploy. They have the monetary policy or the fiscal policy, but our focus for this quarter is the use of fiscal policy, in achieving economic growth. So we're going to look at the challenges, what have countries done over the years, what is working, how many countries have gone through the tax reforms recently, like that was just carried out in Nigeria. There will be various issues that we will be considering in this quarter, but majorly those are the three main schools of thought on the issue of fiscal policy. If you just joined us, thank you so much for joining us. This quarter is another insightful, engaging, explorative and expository quarter, which we'll be looking at fiscal interventions and economic growth. And we've started by talking about the main fiscal policy instrument that governments have deployed, and we have just wrapped up talking about the three main theories of around fiscal policy, where we look at the Keynesian economies, we look at the classical economies and the classicalists, and also consider the monetary view on fiscal policy, and realize that while some opine that fiscal intervention is very important, and that school of thought feel that fiscal intervention could be counterproductive, and the monetary feel that yes, it's important, fiscal policy could help to increase aggregate demand that has immense benefits in an economy. However, the monetary believe that monetary policy is more effective in achieving stable prices in terms of keeping inflation level low, keeping all the inflationary rates in the economy, and also achieving economic growth and development. So thank you for joining us. If you're just joining us on today's inaugural maiden episode. So let's go further to look at the main objectives of fiscal policy. Why is it important? What does it seek to achieve in an economy? The first thing we're looking at is that it helps to achieve efficient allocation of resources. Fiscal policy shows deliberate, concerted effort of various spheres of government to ensure that financial resources and economy are efficiently allocated to developmental activities. So you see that government, the spending is usually geared towards developmental projects, towards capital projects, which would create the right investment climate for the people. That is investment in specific sectors, like investment on education, health, and infrastructure. Expenditure on infrastructure, would create the right investment climate for even the MSMEs to thrive, and even multinationals to thrive, and that would attract more people, foreign direct investment in the economy. Okay, so since this is one of the objectives of fiscal policy, the reason why I want fiscal interventions in an economy, so it's this strong advocate that fiscal policy should be designed in an optimum way that would encourage production of desirable and environmental goods and services, so that should be concerted efforts, so that the policy is designed in a way to optimize the resources that encourage, goods and services that would help increase the level of development in the country. Okay, and of course it's also a tool that you can also use to discourage goods that could pose negative effects on the economy. So in some way, if you want to discourage consumption of harmful substances, you are going to raise the tax. Okay, we're going to look at high tax rates to discourage importation or production of such harmful goods, or even provision of such service to an economy. So one of the objectives of fiscal policy is to ensure efficient allocation of resources. So concerted efforts would be towards allocating resources optimally to developmental activities or projects in an economy. Okay, let's look at another objective of fiscal policy. Now, I'm stating this objective not in order of priority, but just in the way it comes to mind. Okay, another important objective of fiscal policy is to decrease wealth and income inequality. You want to reduce the income disparity in an economy. One of the main macroeconomic objectives that any government will seek to achieve is what we call equitable distribution of income and resources among individuals, among sectors of a nation. We want to actually reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. It's important because that's one of the things we want to do. We have countries with very low level of income inequality. We have countries like that. Okay, so what can you do as government, as a fiscal policy help to achieve this? For instance, government can impose income tax on lower income group at a very low rate. It will be much more lower than high income groups, and of course indirect tax on luxury items will be higher, and in that way it helps to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. And what happens, another way that we see government intervene in the economy is that this tax revenue gotten from the rich, okay, or the high income group earners in an economy cannot be deployed into relief programs that would assist to help the poor in the societies, like taking away from the rich, redistributing income to the poor. That's one of the objectives, one of the aim, the importance of fiscal policy, fiscal interventions of government in an economy. So what other objective do we have? The third one is, of course, employment opportunities. I want to ask how does fiscal policy and fiscal interventions of government, those efforts, how will it translate to employment opportunities for the citizens in an economy? Effective fiscal policy measures will result in increased employment levels in a country. So let's give an instance. Okay, when government invests in infrastructure through increased allocation and government expenditure, what will happen? It will yield both direct and indirect employment. Let's look at the scenario. Okay, government lowers taxes. So when there is a reduction in taxes that MSMEs would pay, of course they would have more money to invest, there will be more funds to invest. It means that there will be increased profitability margin. Okay, and of course it will lead to an increase in investment. An increase in investment means that they would produce more, or even expansion. And expansion means that they're going to need people to employ, and that increases the level of employment rate in the economy. And let's even look at it again, that of course government can decide to spend more money to invest in rural areas. Okay, and investment in rural areas in infrastructure would definitely lead to improved income generating avenues for them, and this would reduce poverty level. Okay, and that's it for fiscal policy aimed at generating employment opportunities. What other objective of fiscal policy do we have? Is that one other germane objective is that it helps to achieve balanced regional development. I'll take it again, that to achieve balanced regional development. The government will come up with various incentives to encourage setting up a project in rural areas. Now, we realize that some regions, the urban centers would always have higher propensity to attract, foreign investors, attract multinationals, to come to invest. What about the rural area? So deliberate effort by government to make sure that people there'll be incentives to drive people to those regions that are rural, that are not develop at the cities or the urban area, because for you to achieve economic development, you must have balanced growth across your regions, across your sectors. So government can come up with incentives like cash subsidy, like concession in taxes and duties. You can have the issue of even tax holidays, that if you cite your company in a particular area or particular zone, that would be tax holidays, and that would encourage people to move into that field. Of course, people want to know what is in it for them, the economic and financial incentives. Okay, and in fact, they could even have financial concession, like concessional interest rate. So if you cite, imagine if you cite your company in the urban area, particular region, and the interest rate is about 25%, but if you cite your industry, okay, or your firm in a particular region, maybe a bit rural, a bit distant, and it's about the interest rate is less than 15%. Okay, or even less than 15. That could be an incentive for a lot of people to want to move there, because if the tax, or even have tax holiday, that the case may be. So these are areas that you see that the fiscal policy, the fiscal tools would help attract people, so that the government can achieve balanced regional development, which is very important if a nation is looking at economic development. And to the last but not the least, I'll be talking about the last objective of fiscal policy is to reduce what we call the balance of payment, the BOP deficit. Fiscal policy aims to promote, a country's export. When we talk about BOP, what do we mean? It's just a balance of payment that summarizes economic transactions of an economy with the rest of the world. So, for instance, the BOP statement of Ghana, looking at the economic transaction of Ghana, with the rest of the world, with other African countries, with Europe, with Asia, other nations, other countries, other continents. So it will summarize all the economic transactions, of Ghana within that point in time. So I want to talk about BOP again. We can also describe it as a record of all economic transactions between residents of a country and the rest of the world during a specific period of time, usually a year. So when we're talking about balance of payment, you're actually looking at the export and import of goods and services, financial assets, of course, along with transfer payment. So basically, for every economy, the government will seek to achieve what we call balance of payment equilibrium. That means a situation where what you export, is equal to what you import. Okay, but that's not a favorable place to be. So when we talk about favorable balance of payment, that's a position where you export more than you import. Okay, and that is really important. So definitely fiscal policy intervention would help. Use of tax to discourage importation, so that a country has an advantage, has an edge when you export more. We are not an import-driven economy, but export-oriented a nation. So, and that has a lot of multiplier effect benefit to such a nation. Okay, so that's it. So fiscal, the list is endless, but these are the ones that we can take on today's maiden episode of our new quarter series, fiscal interventions and economic growth. I thought it's a whole lot about the interview sessions. We're going to have experts in the field of public sector, the field of finance, economics. We're going to have them come, to share the word of experience and expertise, on relevant fiscal intervention issues in this quarter. Wow, this is all we can take on today's maiden episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Staying tuned to the end of today's discussion. We hope that you join us same time next Friday, and also remember to join my colleagues Monday to Thursday same time 5 p.m. WAT for other inspiring, expository, intriguing programs that you're going to learn a lot from. And also remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That are a lot of we have about 250 episodes on various program series, uploaded for you to learn from. And also remember to connect with us on our social media handles on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram is Amogate. And also remember, for your consulting needs, communication needs, we have you. Even training needs, we have you covered at Amogate. Our website to learn more about us is www.theamogate.org. For those who send messages, that's quarter, we do appreciate your feedback. If you have further feedback for us, please mail to send all of your suggestions, your questions, and feedback is and still remains contact@theamogate.org. So thank you till I find my way to your devices again next Friday. But I will not go without leaving. This quote, and that's by Joe Biden, who says, "Don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget and I will tell you what you value." So government spending and taxation reflect these priorities and values. So I want to know the value, the priorities of a government, and look at what you spend your money on. What sector do you spend your money on? That tells me what you value. Don't tell me with no words of mouth what you spend your money on as a government. Repeat what you prioritize. Okay, so I'll find our way to your devices again next Friday, 5 p.m. WAT. I remain Tito Lagushona saying bye from here.